Yes, it is Thursday, and here we are, 7:30 p.m. And before we get started with our program, I wanted to first introduce NoMAA's stroll coordinator and Inwood's very own Martin Collins, who has a special statement to share with all of us tonight. Martin.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us, the second in a series of Stay Home Open Studio tours with Christopher Priore, sponsored by Aqua Marina, a 20-year-old Italian restaurant located at 4060 Broadway and West 171st Street. And we want to thank the owner of Aqua Marina, Omar Reyes, for sponsoring tonight's Stay Home Open Studios tour. Aqua Marina has great food, a robust happy hour, and a weekday early bird special that is delicious. And they're open now at this time for delivery and takeout. You can order on their website, aquamarinany.com. And again, our thanks to Aqua Marina for sponsoring tonight's Stay Home Open Studio tour with Christopher Priore.
Thank you so much, Martin, and thanks so much to Aqua Marina for your support. And thank you all for being here tonight. As Michelle mentioned, my name is Neria Leyva Gutierrez, and I am Acting Executive Director of the Northern Manhattan Arts Alliance. And it gives us great pleasure here at NoMAA to come back tonight for our second virtual open studio tour with Uptown artists, which, as you may know by now, will take place every Thursday night at 7:30. And as you also may know, open studios with our local artists have long been an important and eagerly awaited art stroll event. And so although we cannot physically invite you into these studios, we can bring them to you virtually, and we are so happy to do so. Before I introduce tonight's wonderful artists, I wanted to again thank Aqua Marina and also mention that tonight's program is supported in part by public funds from the New York City Department of Cultural Affairs in partnership with the City Council. We are grateful for their support, especially during a time when the arts feel particularly vulnerable to our uncertain circumstances. And to that end, we'd really like to encourage each of you to stick around for a minute or two after our program and fill out a survey that Michelle will provide. And that goes a long way in helping us to continue to find the best ways to support all of you through our programming. I'd also encourage you to sign up for a weekly eBlast newsletter so that you're up to date on our events, as well as other opportunities and programs in the Northern Manhattan community. And finally, feel free to reach out to us on social media or through email. We love and want to hear from you. But now on to our wonderful artist, and that is the reason you are all here. For over 2 decades, Christopher Priore has both lived and worked in his studio home in Washington Heights. Dating back to the 1980s, Priore is a well-known pioneer of skywriting as an art medium, having influenced a generation of artists. Since then, he continues to engage in other innovative practices in painting, defying space through the creation of works that suspend and project off 2-dimensional walls and extend into the viewer's physical space. He holds a BFA from Carnegie Mellon University School of Art and an MFA in painting from Savannah College of Art and Design. This year, he also earned his SHRM certification through Fordham University while teaching the history of modernism at Bergen Community College. Through his mixed media paintings, which we will hear all about tonight and which you can see that are standing or that are behind him installed, he explores themes of culture, romance, and mortality. Exploring perception, materiality, beauty, life, gravity, location, and narrative, Priore creates multivalent works that challenge the viewer to see art in fundamentally new ways. And so with that, it gives me great pleasure tonight to introduce the artist Christopher Priore. Christopher.
Thank you so much, Neria. Thank you so much, Neria. And thank you so much, Northern Manhattan Arts Alliance. It's my pleasure to be here with you today. Thank you. I look forward to speaking about my work in the studio and answering any of your questions.
And so I think, Michelle, we have the video queued up. We can take a look.
Yes, watch, please. Do you find any questions, anything that comes to mind, you can put in the chat box and we'll be able to get to your questions at the second portion of our
Yeah, I would encourage you that as you're watching the video to please feel free to use the chat function. Ask your questions, and then we'll engage in a question and answer session with Christopher, and we'll ask your questions. What we'd like to try tonight, and if we can do this, is to have you ask directly. We'll give that a shot. We're going to see how that works technically. But if you don't want to ask your question, I'm happy to do that for you. So we'll do that at the close of this tour. And so I encourage you all to feel free to ask any questions that you might have for the artist. I think we're ready to go, right, Michelle?
right.
Good evening, Christopher. Welcome, and thank you for being part of the Northern Manhattan Arts Alliance second in West Harlem, Washington Heights, and Inwood. We're honored to have you join us this evening from your home in Washington Heights. I'd like to begin with this first piece on your left. Have you tell us a bit about yourself, about the piece, and what are some of the big themes in your artwork?
Great to speak to you today and our community, and I thank you for having me through NoMAA. The piece that we're looking at is part of the current body of work that has to do with heart-type shapes, abstractions of heart-type shapes. This piece is in a series of Sacred Hearts. The Sacred Hearts series has to do with looking at ancient Catholic iconography about flaming hearts. Often they have thorns, they may have spikes, and possibly deep coloration. This piece is in progress, but it's nearing completion, and I'm thinking of ending it by having this become a little bit more tighter and connected, and have this negative space be more of a window to look through.
Christopher, what's the title of that piece?
This piece is called Sacred Heart 4. It's the fourth in that body of work.
It's a wonderful piece and a part of your series that you'll show us this evening. These wonderful vinyl paintings, which were part of last year's Uptown Art Stroll Open Studios in June, and we're very glad that you're joining us this evening to discuss them. As we move on to the second piece, we would like to talk to you as you stage how this body of work, this body of paintings came to be.
This body of work is a series that's about 11 years old. I started this during graduate school, which was at Savannah College of Art and Design. I got my MFA at SCAD in 2010, and this is a continuation of my thesis work. And I'm very excited about its original ideas, the themes of culture, romance, and mortality. They've given me a lot of directions I can go with it, and I continue to work with abstractions of heart shapes that I had started in that body of work thesis.
And how long have you lived in Washington Heights?
I've lived in Washington Heights for over 20 years. I had grown up in Pittsburgh. I was born in Buffalo. And when I came to New York, I found that Uptown was a very nice haven where it was a great place to come home to think, to work from the hustle and bustle of Midtown. And it's worked out really great to move my studio that used to be in Tribeca into my apartment in Washington Heights. Consolidated, save time.
I see. As I look at that piece, as we all look at this piece this evening,
one of the questions I have is, how is light important in your work?
I think it's crucial, of course, to see and to look at all art. It's an important partner in viewing art. It has everything to do with shadow and the saturation of colors. I'm taking that a step further by really not only dealing with shadows, but working with reflection and translucent materials. So light can pass through my pigments on a clear ground, and then cast a colored reflection onto the wall. So I think of the piece as in part physical painting, as well as an illusion, a double garment that's important to the piece.
What is the title of that piece?
This piece is "You Always See Me for Who I Am."
Oh, yes.
And it has a lot of nice shapes and dimensions to it.
Tell us a little bit about some of those dimensions.
The pieces come about by starting with a rectangle of vinyl that I paint on. I tend to do a lot of painting on the floor. And then I cut out the shapes. Some of these more vine-like shapes are actually cut out of the painting itself and extend out. It's the beauty of having the painting support be these arrows, because it gives me lots of physical dimension to drape, to support and drape the painting on. It's a really
Hey, y'all, the sound seems to have gone away.
Yes, I hear that. Is it possible for us to rewind a little bit? Or Christopher, you can also take over if we are having technical difficulties. I'm sure we'd happily listen to you talk about your work.
See, let's move on to the final.
I'm happy to do that if you want to stop the recording.
You'll show us
Yeah.
this.
It sounds like it's a little tricky.
Imagery and colors.
So let's actually, Michelle, if it's okay, why don't we bring up some of the images that we have. We can move to sort of questions and answers. And I think, Christopher, you can speak about your work. And if we can also then get a view into the studio, that would be great. We see you there, so we can perhaps have you move around and discuss your works. But I have first of all, I have so many people who are saying hello, and so happy to be here, and your SCAD family is also here. So they're all sending you their hellos as well.
Hello.
If you have some questions, we have a few questions already. So we'll definitely want to talk about that. But I think one of the questions that has sort of come up, and we can sort of introduce these topics while Michelle can sort of find some of those works that you also have that we can talk about as well. But one of the questions that came up from let's see here. Yes, from Beth Moore. I don't know, Beth, are you there? Beth asks, she wants to know a little bit more about your.
Hi.
Oh, there you are. Beth, do you want to ask the question?
Sure. So, thanks. I think I can hear now, and I think we're good. So my question was regarding the arrows and the inspiration from about the arrows. Do they represent the mortality because it's piercing the media, or is it more about movement and direction and kind of the future?
Hi, Beth. That's a beautiful question. They of course represent mortality, as you said, because they do pierce the work, but they're also so important to the life of the work of art because can you hear me all now?
Yes.
High volume good? Okay. So this is where we kind of left off, I think. So no arrow, no painting, no death, no life. It's that type of relationship that you need to have the arrow to support the work so that it will be able to be presented on the wall. And so it's this combination of the relationship of you need bitter to have sweet. We're looking at some images now from.
Yeah.
Go on.
I was just going to say it's such a great question, Beth, because one of the questions that I had, which was sort of your question, was a perfect segue, I think, to even talk about this. Christopher, in our conversations, we talked a little bit about your dialogue with the past, with art from the past, with artists from the past, and of course, the arrows call to mind this question of mortality, as Beth sort of brought up, but this idea of piercing of the flesh or piercing of a composition. And so here we have, of course, the great Veronese's painting of Saint Sebastian. Saint Sebastian, such an important figure, and certainly so connected to plague, which really, I think, I know you worked on this some time ago, but it's certainly interesting considering our own time. Would you like to talk a little bit about your influences and your dialogue with the past and these works?
Absolutely. I've always been interested in history, and of course, like most artists, I've studied art history. That's a big part of all artist training. We're actually a profession that knows our own history of our own profession very, very well. And I think that that's unusual. I tell my students that it's an important thing for artists to know the history of art. We don't want to be reinventing any wheels. And a secret that a lot of people don't know is that a lot of art is really about art. So the more you can see those historical connections, the more the audience can really enjoy works of art of all time periods, because usually they are referencing other art movements and influences, for sure. So I'm very much still interested in this series of Saint Sebastian works that were done in the 1400s, 1500s, 1600s, and especially how I like in these works, there's a dominant feeling that is more about life, really, than about the mortality of the situation that they're being pierced by arrows. Actually, fun fact, Saint Sebastian, who was a Roman captain, he lived through this arrow situation, shall we say. He was nursed back to health by St. Clair, and he lived another day. This was not the end of Saint Sebastian. This was not his martyrdom. In fact, was not by arrows. I know,
Yeah,
Maria,
that's right.
you are also trained in this period of art, so you and I speak the same language about that.
Yeah, no, I think that's really interesting. Yeah, Saint Irene nursed him to health, and what's interesting, of course, is I think the Saint Sebastian, and this is something I sort of am struck by as well. You know, it's the part of his story that was most appealing to artists because it allowed them to examine and to explore the figure, right? They could work, they could talk about the body, they could focus on anatomy, especially during the Renaissance, right? Which was such an important focus, thinking about the classical period and sort of really the relationship with the body. How do you, I mean, your works are not figural, and yet there's movement, and yet you have this sort of figural quality. So what are your sort of thoughts about the body and how you explore that in your work, and how do you explore these questions of light and dark and shade in your own structures that are three-dimensional?
Well, that's a big question. Which part should we start with? You know, shapes have long stood in for figures, of course, in abstraction. So we don't have to have a clearly seen figure to know that we are referencing humanity, shall we say. I'm very interested in creating palettes. You were talking about light and dark. Palettes that help to further the narrative of that particular piece. And this one that we're looking at right now to the left is one of my mentors, Sam Gilliam, his piece that has a similar palette to my piece on the right. And I was just looking to try to drench the painting in deeply saturated fluids that could be references to blood, to wine, to history, to the Mediterranean, to Latin culture, just deeply saturated with life.
That's what I have a question from James. James, do you want to ask your question? We're still sort of talking a little bit about influences. James, are you there? James Bosley?
Yes, I'm wondering if Frank Stella is an influence. I see some of his work reflected here in the way he kind of combines on the wall painting to sculpture-like work.
It's a great observation, James, and I definitely loved and still do the work of Frank Stella. When I was in college, I went from Pittsburgh to New York to see a big show of his on purpose. I planned, that was the point of the trip. I loved how he brought his works off the wall, and I have myself been experimenting and exploring that really from, I would say, my senior year at Carnegie Mellon, making the work come off the wall, and I've dedicated myself to that. That has been a sustained interest of mine, to have to challenge what a painting can be. To add something new to the language of painting. And one way to do that was to make it come out into the viewer space. Subsequently, when you do that, you allow then light to interact with the physical qualities of this object now more. So you have shadow, and soon after, in my 20s, I started to paint the backs of wooden constructions that I was painting, so that the front was painted, the back was painted with fluorescent paint, and that was creating auras. This is an extension of that idea of making the painting have an aura about it, because I do believe that people have auras, and it's another way to reference the human body. I know that everyone has an energy field and has an aura about them.
Thank you. It's a great answer.
Thank you.
Do we have other questions? think I'm
I
gonna
can
sort of look up.
I can turn my computer a bit. Show another work.
Yeah, we'd love that. Could you do that?
This is kind of where we were going with the video before
Yes.
got interrupted. So we can continue with that. So in the studio at the moment, I have 3 big pieces in progress. They're nearing completion. And this is the biggest one. It's called Gratitude. So really having arms out wide, receiving life, being grateful for life, and having a vibrant palette that mirrors that.
Mhm. That's so it's so interesting. I'm sort of struck by this sort of imagery of again these sort of open arms, this notion of aura, you know, your references to Saint Sebastian, sort of the saints and sort of the martyrs. And so what is your, and you're a student of art history, so you know, looking back, you know, were these artists that you were drawn to, or the subject matter that you were drawn to? How did you sort of interpret those larger ideas or those sort of universal themes, because they are universal themes in your works? And of course, you know, removing them from the sort of figural component adds a different layer, of course. So talk to me a little bit about that.
Well, the influence have changed over the years. The connection to Saint Sebastian came literally from this body of work. There wasn't arrows till there was this body of work. The work was supported and came off the wall by other means, less apparent means. But what I was searching for was an iconic, overused image. Icon, and I found that in the heart shape. It's so sentimental, it's everywhere. I wanted to have that challenge when I began this series, and now there's quite a number of paintings in the series. They are abstractions of that shape to try to bring something new to it, try to resuscitate the heart shape. But then, because the material is very light. It needs something to support it to the wall. So I wanted something that made sense with the narrative, and it almost came about as a joke: hearts and arrows, peanut butter and jelly, and you know, as some of my classmates from SCAD who are visiting with us tonight can attest, we talked about that, and it did kind of come out from conversation when I was looking for a way to really continue narrative in my work, and the arrows seemed a great symbol that is throughout the history of art, but also something very practical, because I have a practical side to me, and it just seemed like a great way to connect and hold a piece of art in place. This part here, I'm still thinking about, because I had it originally here, and it just seemed to be in the way a lot, and not necessarily necessary where it was to still make it be an impactful piece. So I'm thinking about just kind of tucking it in here and allowing this tail to have a dimension to it. The work is both to be serious and humorous at the same time. It's life, it's death, and those two things we have to come to terms with and enjoy every moment. I feel strongly about that. So the color, when it's vibrant and it's happy, it's subverting the seriousness of the situation, right? And that's
that really resonates right now. We have a question from Sherry at the Manhattan Times. Sherry, are you there? Do you want to ask your question?
She actually is on Facebook, so she just typed it in.
Okay.
So maybe I could ask
All
it
right.
for her.
Sure.
She wanted to know more about your materials and yeah, the types of materials that you use.
Can you please, Michelle, go
Yes.
to the page number 5 of the document?
Yeah, go for it.
Studies, I think people will find that.
Okay. Okay.
We're about to look at some studies and also some views of the work in progress. So we're about to see this painting when it was flat and on the wall being painted. Exactly. So the photograph to the right has gratitude as it was being painted before it was cut out. There's a whole other history to it. It's flat. It's brought out into space. And then the one on the floor shows how I paint often on the floor so that I don't fight with gravity. The materials I'm using are very viscous, and I don't want to have too many drips. In fact, I don't want to have any drips if possible, because I don't want that sense of gravity that you see in abstract expressionist painting with drips. And I didn't want to connect my work to abstract expressionism in that way. So painting flat and then cutting out later is part of the process. We're getting a sneak peek into, on the left, some of the ways I'm planning my work, because the next steps is to paint, to some extent, the shaft of the arrows, the wood, and to prime them and to paint them. So the bottom left study is an acrylic work on paper that is a color study for how do I want to paint the arrows. And I want to paint the arrows so that they have a relationship to where they intersect with the painting, because that's how life is, right? Where we intersect with someone or something, there's an influence. It influences us. We're never the same. So that was part of that. And then the other study on the upper right, we're no longer on that view, but the one on the upper, could you go back to it, Michelle, quickly? The other study shows how I'm practicing painting the feather fetchings of the arrow, which are quite, you can see that, can you slide it over? They're quite tricky to paint turkey feathers. That's what natural fetchings on arrows are, turkey feathers. And that's been tricky to try to pull off, because you put too much, you make the paint too wet, it makes the feather kind of stick together and lose its fluffiness. So it really less is more, I've discovered, like on the one that's to the far right in that group of four arrows. I hope I answered your question to some extent about process without giving away too many of my secret recipes.
I have another question, and I think it's from a student, Lindsay, who says, "Hi, Professor," and has a question. Lindsay, would you like to ask?
Hi, my question was how long it takes for a work to be completed from the conception of the idea until its like final piece.
Nice to see you, Lindsay. Thanks for coming. We had our last today of history of modernism. Part of that. Well, it depends on what's going on in my life, of course. It depends on how large the piece is. And some of the pieces are rather small, and they're made from scraps of other paintings, because of, as you can imagine, when you cut out the rectangle, there could be leftover parts that have color on them that are still nice to use in another way. I have a long history of reusing my own scraps left over from works of art and reincorporating that. I've been doing that since I was in my 20s. So back to your question is about time. And I've had the fortune of having a career where I've tended to be a solo show exhibition type artist. So I often am working towards a deadline. And I find that deadlines, whether for a group show or a solo show, they keep me on target to complete things on time. I think that's very important in my case, to have a structure of commitments and responsibilities. But also to speak to your point, Lindsay, is the paintings, since they're very time consuming from start to finish, I'm always keeping small drawings going. You can see a group of small drawings on both of my websites. They allow me to accomplish a lot in a short amount of time by having drawings going. So I always have a body of drawings going. I have a large series of drawings ready to exhibit at the moment, and I love to have in my solo shows a wall of drawings and then paintings to go with that. Thanks for your question, Lindsay. Good to see you.
Thank you.
I have another question, and this is about your background as skywriting as art. Can you tell us a little bit about that? I have a question here, and I don't have a name, but I think it's certainly something that so many of us want to know a little bit more about. Could you talk to us a little bit about that?
Absolutely. Well, when I was a senior at Carnegie Mellon, one of our professors made an announcement, as they do at the beginning of class, about an opportunity that the Three Rivers Arts Festival in Pittsburgh was looking for artist proposals. And I was a painting major, as you said, and I didn't really know what to do with that, but I knew I wanted to try for it. But I didn't have the skills, not being a sculpture major, to weld together and create some big kind of, three-dimensional sculpture for a public site. But given that Carnegie Mellon was such a conceptual type program, I knew that that public works could be ephemeral or temporary and have lots of different materials. So that later that day, I saw some skywriting being done in the sky, just some jet trails, nothing artistic, just some lines. And then that just struck me in that moment that now I could do that. I could put together a proposal. I didn't know how to fly a plane. I didn't know how, to do skywriting, but I could learn and I could make a proposal about that. I made probably one of the most simplest proposals in my life, my first proposal. And lo and behold, they accepted it. So I became a working artist that senior year of college, and it just launched my career. They gave me a lot of attention. They gave me a space for my models and my drawings, and we did skywriting 2 years in a row. And then in that chapter of my life, I did others in Dayton, Ohio, to have a connection with the Wright brothers. Mm-hmm. And I'm working on a proposal right now that I'm very excited about for skywriting, called Amore Priore. And I didn't want to, so since I'm not ready to really launch that, I didn't really want to show images, but it does have to do with writing love in the sky in multiple languages. And I'm going to be approaching New York arts institutions about sponsoring that so that we can have that up and running. Hopefully, on the pandemic is ending, we can have something really uplifting like that.
that sounds like a part 2. I think that was Paul's question, so he's been identified. And Paul, it looks like you have a follow-up question. Are you there? Did you find Paul there?
Oh, hello,
Okay.
hello.
Oh, there's Paul.
Can you hear me?
Yep. Yes.
No, I
We
was
can hear
just
you.
making it. I was just making a. I was just making a jab and asking if he was influenced by the Wizard of Oz. Skywriting.
Who wasn't, Paul, for our
That's right.
surrender?
Right.
On many levels.
We will not
That's
heed
right.
that. We all were. That goes without saying.
That's a great comment.
I had
Okay.
a question.
Oh, okay. Martin, and then we
I,
have
wanted-
one from Mary C as well. So maybe Martin and then Mary C.
Sure. Christopher, tell us how important color schemes and imagery is in these pieces and your artwork overall.
Well, color schemes are very important. They create, as you know, the whole mood of a work of art. And I often do color studies to figure out what I want to do with these works. I actually have a whole series of little color swatches. They're not actually that little, color swatches of each of my pigments of these translucent lacquers. I have about 20 of those on the vinyl that I can hold up and look at and just use like decorators do with holding up swatches to judge if I want to paint a wall that color. So I think that color is so important to support the narrative, the mood, or to subvert it in my case sometimes as well. Did I answer your question, Martin? Martin?
Yes, thank you.
Martin, you've been wonderful to work with. Thank you so much for.
Thanks, Christopher.
Thanks, Martin, for your question. Mary C, are you there? You have an interesting question.
Yes. Hey, Christopher. It's
Mary.
Mary from the Center for Spiritual Living.
Oh, great. So nice to see you, Mary Chen. Hi.
Nice to see you too. I need a haircut, but I love your work.
Mary, we all need a haircut, but that's away for quite a while. So you look great.
All right, well.
Go on.
All right, now
Was that what-
back to your art.
Or did you want to talk about
You mentioned your drawing. What was that?
Or did you want to talk about your haircut?
I didn't hear what. Oh, no. It's just that you could see that my hair is a little bit like poofy, but anyways, and long. But back to the subject of your art. And you mentioned your drawing series, and I was wondering what the themes are of them, and stylistically, are they consistent with those of your paintings? And or if they're different.
Well, you can see current drawings at Christopher Priore Studio, both.com and Facebook. That shows a series, to answer your question, that is what I'm working on now. They're very small. They mostly use graphite. So they're trying in some ways to be the opposite of the labor and the steps of the painting by being much more simple in their diversity of materials, and something so classic like graphite on paper. However, the imagery is very much tied in to this work. So they have abstractions of hearts, they have arrows, they have feathers. Some of them have writing in them that connects to skywriting. They may have affirmations in them. I like using text in my drawings, and I see my drawings in kind of categories. One is what we're talking about now, sketchbook, diary-like drawings. That can take a day or a week or several weeks, but a lot of time. Or I also see drawings for myself to be proposals for other works, like a skywriting project, or proposals or studies to figure out how to do something. So like many artists, I use drawing for in different ways. I think the drawing is a foundational practice for an artist. Certainly it is for me.
Thank you. I think we have, and those are really, really great questions. And I think we have time for one more. Michelle, you've communicated with Alex on Facebook. So we'll finish with this question, then we'll move on to our rapid fire question segment of the evening. So Michelle, do you want to ask the question from Alex?
Sure, Alex, possibly Alex Snyder, who says hello, by the way. He says the composition on the wall would be fundamentally different where the lights move. How much of your composition process involves moving the lights around?
Well, if there's no light, Alex, let's say like if I enter the studio in the morning and open up the blinds, I have 2 windows in my art studio in Washington Heights, then just natural light, if it's a bright sunny day, natural light can create beautiful reflections on the work. I have noticed that just natural light is a wonderful partner for my work. But you know, I'm a realist in some ways. I'm not fussy about that because I know that each gallery, each museum space, they're going to have different lighting that I need to work with, and different size walls and spaces and all of that. And then ultimately when the work lives in somebody's home or in a public collection, they're going to be lighting it as well. So I enjoy lighting my own pieces when I install a show. But as other artists can attest to, sometimes the gallery likes to do that. And sometimes I appreciate that collaboration between them. And I think that that's a nice, almost like a nice task to allow the gallery or the curator to do, to light the piece, and then you know, have their involvement with it like that. The works just light really well, actually. So they're hard to mess that up. They really they just cast beautiful reflections.
Okay, thank you so much for those questions. It's been such a treat to have a glimpse into your studio, into your process, into your ideas. I'd like to move on now to our rapid fire segment. So the way this works is that I will ask you a series of questions and you will offer sort of quick off the cuff responses to them, and it'll give us a little extra insight into what's sort of going through your artistic mind right now. So if you're ready, I'm going to sort of put up 2 cards. Are you ready? Oh,
ready.
Maybe not.
Ready.
Okay, here we go. Okay. What is your idea of perfect happiness?
That's a great question. Well, you know, I'll share that today, on our last day of our class of the semester, that Lindsay was there. At the very end, I shared with the students that was my first time actually teaching that course. And I didn't want to tell them that. And I told them I didn't want to tell them that beforehand. I didn't want them to lose faith in me. But it was a real learning curve to follow along the textbook and relearn myself and make it a great course. But it was, to answer your question, real bliss for, at the very end when we were saying goodbye, for many of them to volunteer, that they found it a really interesting class, to quote them. And I was very touched by that because I really wasn't sure how it came off. But because as you know, art history can be very boring if you
No, it's not. No, it's not. Well, Lindsay just, yeah.
like anything else.
Well, Lindsay just agreed that it was a wonderful class. So I'm sure that that's a very, very good feeling. Okay, on to the next one. What are you doing to fill your days? Besides teaching art history.
That's exactly. Right now during during these challenging times, I've been so much enjoying reaching out to family, to my family. Many are here, to friends, many are with us tonight. And also reconnecting with my relatives in Italy has been a lot of fun for me. So just checking on everybody, staying extra close has been beautiful in my personal life. And actually, I have to say, 2020 in my professional life has been very busy. So I don't really feel, sequestered and in any way pacing the floor. I've just been so busy with, actually I was preparing for a very nice 3-person show that was to open May 22nd. I've been working towards that this year, and that was at Drawing Rooms in Jersey City. But we'll do it when the time is right. And so I was active with that. And as we had said before, I was studying and then took the exam for my Society for Human Resource Management senior certification. And that was a big accomplishment for me. So it's been a great year, and it's been a busy year, and we have a long way to go. Next.
Wonderful. Okay, next, quickly. Which historical figure do you identify with?
I'm going to go with Sandro Botticelli.
Wow, okay, nice.
Thank you. Renaissance figure, Sandro Botticelli, because you know what? He has such a timelessness about his work that he must have been a great soul. You just see that in the purity of the forms, the shapes. They're universally loved and have lasted through time. So I just love that about him. I sense his aura. That's my answer.
Oh, I like that. That's a great answer. He's got tremendous range too. I'm a fan. Okay, what is your favorite place in New York City or Uptown?
Well, I live near Fort Tryon Park, and I love to take walks through Fort Tryon Park, especially where you can see the gorgeous panoramic views of the Hudson River. That is truly a privilege.
That's yeah, I would agree. Okay, what is on your nightstand? And is it as meticulous, your nightstand, as your studio? That's an added question, bonus point.
A beautiful glass lamp on my bedroom nightstand. Actually, that was my mother's, and I always treasured it. And there is a connection between the translucency of that glass lamp and my painting. But also importantly, on my nightstand is a book I'm reading right now called Shortcut to a Miracle, which is about making the law of attraction work for you in your life.
Oh, very nice. Okay, we've got 2 quick questions, 2 more. What are you looking forward to the most? Do it after post quarantine?
I'm actually looking forward to resuming in-person romance
That is lovely. Yeah. Okay. And sort of with that, to close out your rapid fire questions, what is your motto or your words to live by?
Well, we had a banner growing up in our kitchen. And then my mom eventually gave it to me. This is my motto. Can you see it?
No. Oh, yes. Let's see. Life is a
mystery to be lived, not a problem to be solved.
That's wonderful. That is wonderful.
Life is a mystery to be lived, not a problem to be solved. I know my sister and many of my family are laughing right now. So, our little band, it's been around.
I love that. That's great. Thank you so much, Christopher. This was really just a wonderful evening tonight. It's been really a joy. And I want to thank all of you for joining tonight. And also thanks to the Department of Cultural Affairs and to Aqua Marina, of course. We hope that you will join us next Thursday night and every Thursday night for the foreseeable future. But before we close for the evening, I'd like to turn it over again to Martin, who will close out tonight and telling us a little bit about next week's studio visit and all of our exciting events. Martin, do you want to take over from here?
Sure. Thanks, Harriet. We want to invite everybody to come back and join us next Thursday, May 14th at 7:30, when Rose Diller will present her sculpture, printmaking, and photography. And for a glimpse into what Rose will share with us next week, please look at her website, Rose Diller, that's Rose, DELER.com, for a snapshot of what Rose will share with us next week. And we want to again thank everybody for joining us this evening, and to please complete the survey that Michelle is posting in the comments, and we'll on the Instagram, Facebook, and website for NoMAA. We count on your comments to make our programs even better each and every week. And we look forward to your participation at 7:30 next Thursday, May 14th. Thank you for joining us this evening. Neria?
Thank you so much, everybody. And Christopher, it was wonderful to have you join us tonight. It's truly an honor. And we were so thrilled to share your studio with everyone tonight. Thank you. Good evening. We look forward to seeing everybody again, same time, same place, from our laptop to yours, 7:30 next week. We'll see you then. Take care, everybody. Good night.
Bye.
Thank you, everybody.
Bye, Christopher.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.